Honourable Sakwa Bunyasi is our guest this hour.
Thank you.
He's the chairman of Vision 2030 Delivery Board, and he joins us this morning to talk about 7 years away from Vision 2030. It should have been completed. Karibu sana to the hot seat.
Asante.
We'll try to keep it hot.
That's what I've observed.
Right.
I've listened to some of your programs.
Oh, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
do. From time to time, it goes very well. Last time I listened, you had Mr. Wanjigi in this seat.
Yeah.
And he was talking about bankruptcy, including bankruptcy of nations.
Yes, he was.
Yes.
Certain decisions to be made, right?
Yeah, things like that, yes. I heard him say that.
And certain facts to be faced.
So in the year 2000, Vision 2030 was launched.
Yeah.
Officially.
2008,
2000,
yes.
Yeah. And said that by the year 2030, certain things were going to happen. And if I look at Kenya Vision 2030, from the very beginning, one of the things it says is that Kenya Vision 2030 is a long-term development blueprint for the country and is motivated by a collective aspiration for a better society by the year 2030. The aim of Kenya Vision 2030 is to create a globally competitive and prosperous country with a high quality of life by 2030. It aims to transform Kenya into a newly industrializing middle-income country, providing a high quality of life to all its citizens in a clean and secure environment.
Very good.
Isn't it? That's the vision.
That's the vision, yes. And the dream.
And the dream.
Yes.
It's now 2023.
True.
Are we still dreaming? And when are we going to wake up? I guess is the question. And where are we in terms of this dream?
The process of development requires continuous dreaming, in the sense that you have to build hope and seek to realize it at every stage. It is a process. The expectations of wananchi that it should be an event, one in which you set up that target and you cross it. I've already crossed the Rubicon here and therefore I'm done. No, it's a continuous and very fluid process, as a matter of fact. We are now 7 years away. There have been areas in which, and I will not go through a scorecard today on every item, but just broadly speaking, there are areas in which there has been a fair amount of progress towards what was expected. In the infrastructure department, for example, so to say, section of things, we have had roads built. There may be additional issues of distributional quality and so on, but we have roads built. I think we now stand at about 25,000 kilometers that were done, for example, in the last year and a half. And many more progressively. This is not the accumulation of all the roads, but just saying where we are on an annual basis. We have infrastructure around ports, like in Lapset, trying to open up the northern corridor, and so on. So there's a lot more to be done, but there's been steady progress in that respect. We have had some of the gains people might have forgotten, but this goes back to the time when we got a new constitution. The preparation of that constitution was the first event, precursor, but also the sort of first opening success, you'd say, that Kenya was now seeking to have a predictable political environment in which they can now plan and dream, as we say. And that, I think, has gone, generally speaking, has gone quite well. It's given us this opportunity to debate things and disagree while we're within the same stable. I think that has been really a major development. The education sector, revolutionizing the primary sector, the CBC came in. The CBC has come in with, as you know, a lot of debate and so on. But that's the nature of development, that people are people don't like change, especially rapid change and so on. But that's part of what was intended. There has been a greater realization on the blue economy, the so-called blue economy, which is an attempt to harness the resources in the sea and the water bodies, the aquatic side of things, progressively. Now, there is still a lot more to be done, and it won't all be done by 2030. 2030 shall not have become clearly and unarguably that we are a prosperous nation, but we are a nation seeking prosperity. and chipping away at what needs to be done to provide better and higher incomes. And this is an interesting time to discuss this, because we are at a time when whatever this journey was, whatever dreams we might have been, we may have been, sort of woken up broadly by the events that, engulfed the region, the world, including Kenya as well. First we had the COVID issues that came out of the blue and hit the sort of Tilpiga Butua, we don't know from which side. That was one. Then a drought has been raging, and so there are many things. There are many shocks. There are many ways in which you can destabilize or shake up people from their dreams, as we said. Cost of living has been rising, not this year, not last year. It's been rising over the last 5 years. It's been creeping up quite steadily. I know that for a fact, because having been in Parliament and I was in committees that looked at questions that are related to this. It's just that we did not think, we thought this is a passing cloud, but this needed to be addressed. And I think it has come to a point where it is, I would say, I would hope it's at its peak, and can only get better. It has to get better.
Sure.
So, but this is something that doesn't come up overnight. It's something that you turn your blind eye, and then things sort of grow. Now, those have become, when they hit you like they have in the last year and a half, too, everybody begins to focus on that. But in the order of development, if you're looking at a 30 or 20-year horizon, this just becomes a slight blip in it, a painful one to live through. It's like flying through a turbulence, and
right.
You kind of think, oh, this is there. Then after that, oops, you begin sipping your tea or whatever it is you're going to do.
So are you saying that the turbulence then does not scuttle the dream? Because
no, it doesn't.
It doesn't scuttle the dream, so you're saying it's going to happen.
The dream will still come, must come. We must aim for it. We can miss the dream if we close our eyes, altogether, and so we can't get the pathway clearly. But the purpose of the vision program is to remind us and try and bring us back each time on track, on the focus, on the dream, and also on the actions that we need to have working on the dream.
There are those who would argue that in trying to understand what can be achieved with this dream is to look at what has been achieved. Because that's a clear pointer. Because if you had this idea and some of them have been actualized, and you can point and say, well, this has been done, this has been done.
Yes.
I am sure you have such a list.
Yes, we have the list. Let me put it this way. We at Vision 2030 are in the process of preparing a status report to address exactly this question, to say where are we in Vision 2030, and to do so with evidence, with data, and so on. That's going to be one of my first major deliverables at Vision 2030. But we do progress reports. Their progress reports are done annually, and these progress reports are different from the evaluation I am saying we're going to do. It's actually already underway.
Explain to us how.
Yes.
It will be different, please.
The difference would be, in a progress report, you're sort of saying, where was I from point 0? Where was I at 0? I'm going to 1, and so on. And if you're at 5, where was I at 4? And I'm going to 5. You can give incremental changes that you observe are occurring. And if they are continuing to grow incrementally, then you're making satisfactory progress, because you're growing, you're not receding. Sometimes you might be stationary. Now, the status report, cross-sectoral report, is to say, what is the net effect of this accumulation of these increments that we have been having? We would perhaps say now, let us look at the road sector, not just what we did last year, we shall do this year, what has been done totally, what net effect does this seem to have towards our goal of a prosperous nation with social and economic transformation, growing and so on. We, for example, now, in the current administration, the Kenya Kwanza administration that we have now, has a major economic focus, socio-economic focus on the bottom-up economic transformation, they say. So we would, in doing this evaluation, I'll step back just a minute before I say that, but in doing this evaluation, we'll be saying, to what extent are we in sync are we promoting this socio-economic policy in the nation and so on. And that process, for example, has begun in the last, I think, 9 months or so. Is it 9 yet? After the last election, there have been major efforts to align the development process at the center with the county government development strategy, where they have the CIDPs, the county integrated development plans. Right. And then to say, how does what they do, because they're using government resources, as is the national government, how can we get what they do to be consistent and in consonance with the overall development we want to achieve for the country? Yeah. And in the bottom-up economic transformation process, the choice strategy is to say we'll work with value chains in, say, for example, for the economic side of the transformation. And if you work with value chains, it means you see what is on now, but you go all the way back to its start, its finish, whatever that value chain is. Our county is going to be doing the same, and there have been major efforts trying to get them to work together. Two, it helps the counties appreciate what is the national priority and direction, and to say their share of development as well will align to those. After all development is in counties, all 100% of the development, because there's no part of Kenya that's not in a county. Mm-hmm. However, each county then has a different capacity to contribute to this vision that we have got. So what has been achieved? I think that we can look at various things. One is I talked about the road network. It's always the easier one. The engineering projects are always the easiest ones to look at, because they're measurable in terms of start to finish, in terms of impact and quantum.
Because they're visible.
Yeah, because you can see the road, right?
People can see the road and so on. The social ones are more tricky, because we can argue that we have achieved, have not achieved. But there is no doubt, for example, that the changes that are occurring, let us take education, are far-reaching at the primary, at the lower levels. Early childhood education has taken root. I think we are now taking it for granted, but the idea that children should go to preschool before they go to grade 1 or standard 1 is now currency, is now part of what we take for granted. This has been codified, so to say, more robustly with the onset of the Vision 2030, that it's now a formal part of education system. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, then we have gone into the CBC with the wisdom of all of who looked at it. And I think people are beginning to appreciate that it's probably different in what it does. There's still, the jury is still out there on its affordability, particularly for parents and so on. But what it does also that shook many parents is that it needs much more parent involvement in the education than was the case before. Mm-hmm. But that's one of those, and I think it will be a different generation of people later in CBC as they go through the whole system. TVETs have come in to infuse technical skills and so on and so forth. University education has exploded, as you know. And I think Kenya is now one of the few countries on the continent in which educated manpower is not in short supply. Or deploying it and getting it with the market required skills is now the next challenge, and you can do this through finishing. And so there are some of those that have occurred. Sure. On the infrastructure side, apart from roads, the port development, with the SGR, for example, now it's a reality, and we can of course discuss other ambient issues that were around the SGR, but be it as it was, the SGR is in place. It's actually doing what we expected to do, not fully because it wasn't taken to the end. It was supposed to go all the way to our borders to move goods rapidly through the territory. It has settled down for the time being at Naivasha. I would imagine that the next phase of it would be to get it off to Kisumu, to connect on the lake, to get it off to Busia in Malaba, to connect it, Malaba and Busia, to connect it to the western growth poles of this country, Uganda, Northern Sudan, Southern Sudan.
There are such plans in the offing.
There are those plans. So they are part and parcel of what this is all going to be about.
I want to look at the plans, because when you talk about a vision, usually the plans then essentially are what deliver this vision.
Yes.
Vision 2030 does have plans. at the very least, these plans are on paper. MPT1, NTP1 rather, NTP 2
and 3.
3, and then 3 comes with the Big Four agenda, and then now 4. Now, if you look at the trajectory of these plans, from the things that you've talked about, would you say that these plans have been followed, and that within the factors that make up these plans, you would then be able to tick off and say, this is what we envision for this plan? We have actually been able to finish them and complete them. Then we can actually deliver this vision in a wholesome manner. Because oftentimes, and I must be honest, it feels as though things are happening in silos. Things are just happening all over the place, and it's not following a plan. And at the risk of sounding almost cliche, we've seen economies whereby plans have clicked and plans have been followed. They've even beaten the timeline for their plans, and have entire cities having been built fully functional where people don't even live. So here, at the risk of, falling into the danger trap of doing some kind of comparative analysis with other countries, would you say that the plans that had been put out have been followed to the letter? Because if they haven't, that could probably pose as a problem.
Yes, I think that you have touched on a wide spectrum of things, including the sort of things that make planning problematic. The sort of things that can be able to divert a dream and so on. You're right. Those observations are valid completely. One reason why, when, as you know, the first president that initiated this long-term vision thing was President Kibaki. When his administration, when Kibaki left at the end of his administration, and the next administration came in under President Uhuru, he must have felt that this is too broad. I can't quite put my finger on which of these things will mark my legacy. So he decided that he will focus on a few areas. The rest will continue to be done, because the government, the entire planning and development system was in the 2030 mode. What is it we can do? You're given some sort of target, a future target, a timeline. What are you doing in your sector? Whatever you are doing in as part of government service delivery, you are supposed to be focusing on to 2030. But he felt that there should be something that are even faster accelerators than the general development plan. That might have looked lackadaisical sometimes and so on, because the government is the economy-wide thing is broad and so on. So he came up with the areas and said, let us push manufacturing to move much faster than it is doing now, so that we can achieve our goals. And, there has been mixed results on that, and I can comment a bit on that also. He talked about health. Health is a critical function. And is one thing that teaches every household in this country. And he thought about having which was intended, universal health care. He said, let us push that universal health care and so on. So there are various areas where this was done. But then what happened? Of course, housing. Housing is a big issue, particularly in urban areas. He pushed that, not to the exclusion of the others, but I guess it was a way of seeking to get these drivers and these transformative sectors to move faster. If manufacturing had moved at the pace it was intended, it will chip away at unemployment substantially in the formal sector and so on. So all those intentions were great. The achievements in terms of manufacturing, we wanted manufacturing to grow to a point where it was about 20% of GDP. It moved up for a while steadily towards 10, 11 and so on, but it's like a yo-yo. It can go forward, it can go back, and then it sort of slid back a bit to 8 point something percent and so on. But the intention is to push it back towards 20. It's a battle. It's like you're pushing up this heavy object on a slope. If you relax, it will push you back. And so the force to push it must be continuous and so on. And with those intentions, you might reach soft ground and you still slide and so on. But the intention is kept on going back there.
Indeed. 7 years out to that date, the Honourable Sakwa Bunyasi is with us in the studio. He is the chair of the Vision 2030 Delivery Board, and we're having that conversation this morning, going through the motions and saying there were plans that were put out. There is money that has been spent. There's even more money that has been allocated. What challenges have been faced in delivering this vision to date until 2023, whereby we're saying 7 years to go? And we could even get, religious here and say 7 years, 7 is the number of perfection. In the next 7 years, these things will be perfected. Is that speaking idealistically, or are we saying that it's very possible that we're going to get to 2030, right? And some of these things that we talk about having served as deliverables will not have happened? I'll give you an example. I mean, in the very about of Vision 2030, what are some of the things that we said? That it was to make sure that Kenya is a middle income country, providing high quality life for all, not some, all. Not medium quality, not low quality, high quality life. So if you look at the very basics, food, shelter, if we look at healthcare, if we look at education, that it has to be at the top for all Kenyans by 2030. Is it possible to deliver 2030, the vision, from what you're seeing?
It is problematic to deliver it to the letter as you stated, which is really the intention. That's the goal.
Vision 2030 stated, though, not
yes,
me.
Yeah. You've just read it out for us.
Yes.
No, just thank you very much, in fact, for that reminder. I'm sure to our audience also it's very useful.
Yeah.
We want to be a middle-income country. Yes, we are a lower middle-income country, and the idea is to be higher within the middle. There's the lower and the upper. We want to edge up even more and be solidly in the middle with little risk of sliding back. And I think that has remained as a goal. The advantage of keeping it as a goal in whatever we are doing is that we're measuring ourselves in terms of where we should be, not back from where we have come from. That's very useful, but how far do we have to go? If you're an athlete, you must reach the finish line. Otherwise, all your effort, if a Manyala goes and stops a meter short of the finish, he's not done, despite all the energy he has expended. So that, I think, that goal, aiming, striving to go forward, I think is a very good thing in Kenya's current development stance. Now, shall we get there? We might fall short of some of that. One, we have not achieved in the manufacturing sector the target growth that we had expected. We had expected to get to be nearer, probably by now we should be nearer 17, 18% as we head down towards 30. This sector has been struggling for various reasons that are not inside the sector necessarily. Some are not. Because, for example, if I may just comment a bit on manufacturing, the issues around cost of power are still a challenge for industry. The global factors that have been a problem are still a problem. For example, now the U.S. development policy of raising interest rates is sucking out foreign exchange from across the world, and people are preferring going to that market. So we have these challenges. We think they are going to be short-term challenges, and so on. So there are factors that may militate against our getting there. Of course, we have the issues related to drought and climate change and so on. But let us say this is part and parcel through which we are expected to navigate. It's not as if they were completely unexpected. In the process of development around the world, you always expect there will be some outside factors, exogenous as they call them, outside factors that might affect what you're doing internally. The challenge is not that they can't occur, but that when they do occur, your coping strategy is a tested one, is a good one, and so that you can, muddle through and move forward. A lot of this is muddling through, I can assure you. When you look back, looks good. But as you look forward, there are so many unknowns. You just have got to get the best way going forward. Shall we get there by 2030? Shall we be a prosperous nation with high quality life, including a good environment and so on? That's probably little ambitious, but we shall be along that route that has been stated.
You know, when one talks of dreams and hopes, those who believe in the Christian faith and read the manual of operations for that faith called the Bible, there's a sector in that book called the Old Testament, and there's a story of a gentleman who had a dream. This is Vision 2030. Him, it was Vision 77. 7 years of drought, 7 years of plenty, and the other way around. But the reason why that dream became a reality was because the person who was in charge of that particular country decided that this person who had the vision was to be given power. And the power that person was given was only second to his. So he said, okay, come up with a plan to ensure that when we have plenty, we will be able to do whatever is necessary so that we survive the other 7 years when there's absolutely nothing. So, I think you know where I'm going with this, don't you? Okay.
Yes.
You have a mandate.
Yes.
To fulfill this dream. What muscle do you have to ensure that it is fulfilled?
Okay. Good point. Vision 2030 is, you could say, is a coordinating shop. It is an advocacy shop. It does not hold resources whatsoever. There are no resources allocated to Vision 2030 to cause the development we have talked about.
Powers?
The powers, there are powers of voice to be able to identify where there is action, where there's lack of action, to point out as we sit together with the actors in the economy. On the board of Kenya Vision 2030, for instance, all the permanent principal secretaries are members of the board, plus others, private sector 7 and their other actors, Central Bank, Capital Markets Authority, all of the big wigs that are in development. As you get together to say, we are moving forward on this, we are sliding on that, and so on. So it becomes a voice that can call out where there is action or the lack of action, so that the institutions and the authorities, as they listen to it, can redirect resources, can sort of hit the knuckles a bit and say, come on, let us wake up, let us move forward. That's what it does, really. It doesn't hold a muscle in terms of resources. We can deny anybody, but we can point out where there is lacuna and where there is some progress. That's a powerful tool too.
Indeed.
It is indeed, but you see, if I look at other government agencies or government departments who are mandated to carry tasks that are of national significance and import, they have teeth, they have muscle. It's like telling me now that, for instance, just as an example, that KRA was an advocacy group advocating for the collection of taxes. How would that go? How far would you get with that? Or the Kenya Police Service is an advocacy group that meets with all the top officials of government to discuss and talk about the possibilities of ensuring that there is security in the country. Or, let me take it even further, the military, if it was an advocacy group that sits together from time to time to talk about how it is, we as a country can protect ourselves and the sort of things we ought to do, and yet somebody else has the powers to actually implement, how far would we go?
I hear you. In this case, the difference is that the actors in this are in place. The resources are put in areas of action. You put it in agriculture, you put it in roads, you put it in the military, you put it in defense, in security and so on. You actually have actors who exist for the purpose of meeting this goal. The only thing then that you need is to say, how do we know all of this has happened? Instead of listening to 20, 30 different voices, you can get them to come from one coordinated, not necessarily centralized entirely, but coordinated place. So the fact that this coordinated place does not have the muscle by itself is not totally disadvantaged, because we get a voice, we speak all the way to it reaches the president almost continuously. We are located in the presidency. I have my appointment from the president. I report back through his most immediate teams, like head of civil service, like the various CSS, like public prime cabinet secretary and others. We report through those channels that go back to the presidency. And the presidency is the symbol of government, is the head of government, all right, but it's also the symbol of national unity and growth and development. He's not going to ignore it. He exists as president for the reasons of achieving this goal. So by talking to him in a responsible way, meaning that we leave out the hypes and the complete lies and other things that might emanate from the various subsystems under him, and report what is important and what can move these things forward, and report what is not working as well. So the lack of that muscle is, in a sense, compensated by you can say leverage. What's the leverage? That the voice of in terms of what's happening, what's not happening, has a way of getting the wheels of the system to turn and so on. So it's not entirely air. No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But the very structure of it comes in with the inbuilt roadblocks, because your success is going to be measured by the representative ministries and departments.
Precisely.
Now, if you look at the individualistic manner in which government works, depending on which ministry, and how cloistered they tend to be with functions that pertain to them alone, there is no guarantee that the functions that attribute directly to this vision will take priority.
Now, there wouldn't have been, except that in this case, what the Vision 2030 did is to transform all of the services of government, all of them, to have goals related to where they want to be by 2030. They brought all of them in the fold. So everything that is done, everything entirely that is done by each of these government agencies is to say 2030 for us is a symbol of how we must develop our capacity to deliver services to this country, and what is it that in our own sector we would like to do by that time. So the entirety of what they are doing is headed towards 2030. Now, if we say there is a lack of achievements alone, it means that these particular sectors or departments or sections have not picked up as fast as they would have liked to do so themselves, because now everything is inside it. Now, I should have mentioned, of course, that it's not all public sector. Of course, public sector is the most obvious one, is the one that votes resources. The intention was to have 30% public sector contribution and about 70% private sector contribution. To do these other investments and changes and reforms in a way that improves the working environment for the private sector, so they can unleash their own resources and invest into it. If this were to turn out to be the expectations and the actual actions to be entirely government, that obviously would be completely slow. We can never achieve where we are intended to go.
Sure. Does there not then need to be a symbiotic relationship between the brick and mortar and the very spirit of this vision? Because we can talk about all these things needing to have happened, but then the people who deliver, because you talked about representation at county level, there's no part of this country that's not in the county. Everybody has a little bit to of their own to deliver, and it all is the little pieces that make up the vision. But if we don't carry that vision, if the folks who are living out the very physical manifestation of this vision, whether it is turning up at work every day and doing a little bit of what needs to happen, if you don't imbibe it, to me it's almost impossible to deliver it. I remember something that I read about the Chinese leader Mao Zedong, and people would carry around the little red card, and it was always about Chairman Mao, that whatever it is he said, this is where he's leading the country. So everybody, didn't matter whether you were a student overseas, didn't matter whether you were an engineer somewhere in Shanghai, everybody was carrying around Mao's creed. So if we're saying that this is where Kenya ought to go, and the very people who are to deliver the vision, their little part of it, in wherever they find themselves, don't carry the vision, to me, it seems like a very difficult feat.
You have used a very, very good example. Let me just pick up for a moment, and then I'll get into the other part of the comment you have made. That era in China, when Mao was like, we could say, in ordinary parlance, a goddess, a demigod, yes, and that kind of thing, had one lasting impact after he left. Loyalty to goals, loyalty to the nation. And the Chinese are very strong in that. They may have had some of those cultural facets, but before the revolution, they had gone different ways. You know, like we do in many of these capitalistic countries, everybody goes his own way. But that card carrying, both in reality and you know, as an idiom, as an imagery, was extremely powerful. It delivered behind a nation of high achievers, with clear goals and so on. And with the more recent past, where the gains to individuals now are greater than they had been during Mao's time itself. So similarly, if in Kenya we get used to the idea of planning towards a goal, so that resources are allocated in relation to the speed with which you're moving and the distance you still have to go to reach to, let's say, 2030. And by the way, we have used 2030 simply because that's the one in vogue now, in place now. But this visioning into the future is going to be a continuing process. We soon will be thinking about the era beyond 2030 and saying, oh, we've only gone this far. What did we not do right? And that's why I'm saying this rigorous evaluation we shall do will help us with those questions. And I will request at that time that you allow me back, and that's so that we can tell you now where exactly we have reached on this. And that we need to continue. For example, now the thinking is, yes, take stock accurately of what is happening to us 2030 and 2030 itself, but you must then think beyond.
Sure.
You're going to be thinking beyond because the other institutions around the world, the United Nations, the global goals around the SDGs, the African Union, they're all now beginning to think about African Union is thinking about 2063, which happens for us in 2063. We shall be 100 years old. So after 2030, we'll probably think about Kenya at 100. But then taking a realistic assessment, what it is that worked in our effort to coordinate our resources, to think in a way that takes us in the same direction for everybody. And why is that important? It touches everybody's life. You talk about health. My grandmother in the village doesn't know about 2030, but she knows that the health facilities have either moved on properly or they have slid back and they are no longer working as well as they were. That's a commentary on either towards success or failure. And then how do you adjust? And hopefully we can get harmony between county government operations and goals and goal setting and implementation capacity as well as the national government. And, you know, sliding can occur on either side, either county governments or national governments. Governments have, this government has got goals, for example, just to conclude on that point, has got goals in the agriculture. Agriculture is so important to both as a transformative milieu, but also because it's a large part of our economy, to say what things can we do well. Well, we talked about leather, we have talked about textiles, we talked about milk, and so on, specific ones that we talk about meat, and so on. So there are many dimensions to horticulture, and and so on and so forth. The means of getting there is opening up markets, infusing technology, and so on. So if we all work broadly in that direction, county governments will be doing their thing, national government, but we are generally consistent and moving in the forward direction. That's how development occurs. But there are some countries that have moved much faster than others. And I know in Kenya it's very fashionable to be up on a platform, particularly for us. Me, I'm an ex-politician, but say for practicing politicians, to say, Kenya and Korea and
used to be at par.
We used to be at par. You heard that story?
Yes.
We heard very often.
That's right. Yeah.
We even throw in Singapore. We
even throw in Singapore for good measure.
Yes.
They even say, Singapore came benchmarking here. So and so came benchmarking here. And then the question is, so where are they, where they are, and where are we, where we are? And there are many factors that people have used. I don't want to divert the discussion by getting into those factors, but that each nation has its own. We should worry about our uniqueness that's making us not move up as fast as Korea. We have to go to Korea now. Not only we can't even benchmark. We just go there to admire, and we benchmark on still fairly limited aspects of what they have achieved. Limited. They have completely revolutionized their societies in ways of lives have disappeared, new ones have come in, and so on. And there are challenges in rapid growth as well. But maybe it's a challenge that would be admirable to have than the one we have got now. Too rapid growth rather than not adequate growth. So we have to work within what we can, what
To
we
make it,
have. Yeah.
yeah.
And we
If
should
I
keep
can-
our eyes on the ball.
goal.
That's the important thing.
How much has been spent to deliver this vision until where we are today?
I don't have the figure to give you now, but you can say from the public sector, is the totality of the annual public expenditures that we incur. Because now everything we do is headed towards 2030. Even in the security sectors, it will be, they are also thinking, they're modernizing and so on, and they have got their plans by such a time, we should have this capacity and so on. So all the totality of our expenditure is what we are spending on the 2030 vision. Nothing is outside.
So we're saying even as we go into June to deliver a new budget in Kenya, that all of that will go into making sure that 2030, the Vision 2030,
that the goals were nearer. Now, the only ones that you could say from a technical point of view that does not go towards 2030 are the leakages, the corruption, the wastage, and so on. Now, those are resources that are not helping in that journey. But it's baggage that somehow in a human institution, in the Kenyan setting, let us not put it all in humanity around the world. The Kenyan setting, we know that issues around wastage, issues around corruption have become part and parcel of us. And this is a big fight, as bigger than fighting for the goal of 2030. You have to try to reduce that as well. Other than those, the net resources that are actually spent towards the development are towards Vision 2030.
Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Vision 2030 obviously is a conversation that we can't stop having.
No, it's a continuous
If the
one.
country got on this path, it needs to continue, and we look forward to that report coming out. And
Yes.
we'd love to have you back in the hot seat as we look towards 2030.